being white doesn't make you an oppressor. Like, that's not a thing. Owning other people makes you an oppressor.
Brianna, what's on your radar?
All
right.
Katya, I have what might be a hot take on the word woke. Hear me out. There is no one definition of wokeness. And the conversation that's emerged about whether there is a single definition of wokeness sort of misses the point. Now, of course, I'm alluding to our now viral rising interview with author Bethany Mandel, who co-authored a book about a war the left is allegedly waging on American children. In case you haven't seen the interview, which now has a Washington Post write-up, 2 Daily Beast write-ups, and a Huffington Post write-up, and
why do we still live in this world? Why do we still live in the world of like corded stuff? Golly, like this is the true Satanism of our time. Like, now I have to fucking like, this is a trap. We used to be a country. Now, you know, I gotta feed it through this. God, I hope this even works. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're back.
Which has been viewed over 7 million times on Twitter.
Holy
in her
shit.
interview, Mandel used the term woke repeatedly to describe the nature of this war on children. So in an effort to better understand her specific grievance, I asked her how she defined the word. Here's the now viral clip.
Oh, thank God.
Consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, you know, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining.
So, like, okay. Let's see. Okay. So, when we talk about wokeism, what I tend to find, it is a catch-all term for essentially any leftist or critically what's the word, skeptical like frame of thought centered around like usually kind of the moral implications of like of politics, basically. You know, like even me, if you ask me to define it, it's like it's always hard, because it's like, well, is it the thing where like you know, is wokeism, as we heard from like Tim Pool, when you have a high ESG rating, but you're like, you know, you're a private bank, a private institution that makes money on the, you know, buying and selling of like securities and stocks and everything else. Like, is that woke? Because one would argue that even being in the business of buying stocks, bonds, all the rest of that shit in and of itself can't be woke, because wokeness would be at least ostensibly described as left wing, to which it's like, all right, if it's a left wing, are we talking like, you know, like mild liberalism? Are we talking socialism, Marxism? And like, I find that this happens with a lot of people. Like, you know, they say, they'll be like, you know, I'm not into all that woke stuff. To which I'm like, well, what stuff are you referring to? And they're like, oh, well, like curbing speech. And I was like, so you mean censorship? And they're like, well, yeah. And then the obvious question then is like, okay, why'd you say wokeness then instead of just saying censorship? And they're just like, oh, I don't really know why. You know, there's like, you know, woke is like, I guess, a lot of stuff. And you're like, okay, so what else is it? And then they go on to name like things that aren't censorship. And then you're like, wait, but I thought woke was censorship. And they're like, well, it's like, you know, a few things. And it's like, okay, so is it anything or is it nothing? Like, like what are we talking about here? And overall, it seems like it's a, like when people say woke, I feel like they have, you know who I feel like people have, honest to God? What is he? Oh, that is a P. I feel like this, okay. Like, tell me I'm wrong, but you couldn't convince me that that what's it called, when people like whenever people say woke, it feels like this is what they're thinking of. Like, this is who they're thinking of. It like if you honestly ask me who I think people like, what people envision in their mind as being woke, it's literally PC Principal from fucking South Park, which, thank you South Park for that one. But because like a lot of like, there's a lot of people who like watch South Park pretty casually, and they get a lot of their like politics from South Park, and they also get kind of a way of understanding like different groups and different, like, I guess kind of like sub ideologies, or at the very least like different you know, like I don't even know. Wokeism isn't really an ideology, so it's kind of hard for me to even say ideology. But like whenever people talk about like wokeness, I swear this is what they're thinking of, even though this is beyond being a caricature, rather like not really a character. Like, the character of PC Principal isn't a character in the show. They're a like bundle of a lot of like left-wing stereotypes, but put in, but like drawn to be like kind of more of an like kind of the like the thought of like, or at least like the manifestation of what like an aggressive man would be. It's all like very vaguely drawn, very like non-specific, but I think this is kind of what people think of. Like this is what I feel like they have in their head to a good degree.
Defining it is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. Sorry, it's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
No,
Yeah, and it's like,
imagine and
like, because her definition is like, let's actually listen to her definition really quick. This is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression.
Right. So the question immediately is like, what do you mean redo society? To which also the question has to be like, if you meant we need to restructure, then you would have to tell me that we've never restructured societies ever before. Like, because that's the thing, right? Is like when she says redo, she's thinking like, oh, you know, there's the argument that we need to restructure our society. To which it's like, which is like crazy. To which it's like, well, no, like societies restructure all the time. Like, that's not really a new phenomenon. Like, things happen in societies, and like there are restructurizations like afterwards, because, you know, after something, you know, after after the banks crash in like 29, right? We had to restructure our economy, restructure our society to better fit to better fit our society to center the average person, regular Americans, as opposed to kind of the system we had before, which left a lot of people behind. Now, obviously, like, you know, things have happened since then, but like this happens all the time. Like, Japan had to restructure their society after World War II. Germany had to restructure their societies after both great wars. You know, like even Britain, most of Europe had to restructure their societies after both world wars. So it's kind of like, this isn't really that new. We had to restructure our society after the Civil War. I don't personally think we did enough, but like the idea of restructuring your society on a like conceptual level as being bad in and of itself is like, I don't even know if I'd say foolish. It's just it's an inability to like grow. Like wouldn't you want the society to grow, change, learn from mistakes, readjust? Like, you know, one would think you know, you would, if you have a society that's unjust, would it not be a positive restructure? It would not be positive to restructure that society to be a more just society. Like, fuck, we did this when we were the colonies and then became America. Like, we are born from restructure, from the restructure of a society. Like, oh shit, didn't mean to do that.
Redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression.
Right. And then, like, the other part of this that I remember her saying is, like, it's wokeness is about restructuring society to create hierarchies of oppression, to which the question must become, then what do you think people, as a leftist, right? As a leftist, whoa, shit, my water. As a leftist, I am constantly told that there are not hierarchies of oppression, right? That is something that I recognize in our system the way that it's built right now. We can see this very plainly with almost every single group. Women, as a good example, do not make the same on average. Like, we can talk about the pay gap, which is shrinking, but it still exists. Women still make less on the dollar for similar experience as male counterparts. That's one aspect. If we want to talk about men disproportionately are not given child custody and also handed down stricter sentences when it comes to criminal justice and parental award cases, right, respectively. Like, men in that way are discriminated against. There are hierarchies that keep men out of those in jail more often, and not the caretakers of children, because there is the hierarchy of the patriarchal belief that women are better child bearers, are better child raisers, which that's an intuitive thought, but we all know people whose like moms were not great moms. We all know people whose dads weren't great dads. Like in no way could we possibly say that women inherently are just better, flat out 100%, than men are at rearing children. Like, that's just not really true. But yeah, if you want to talk about, black people, it's the criminal justice system that bears down on them a lot more than other communities. If we want to talk about Asians in America, you'd probably have to bring up the myth and the proliferation of the model minority, which bears down on those groups, puts extra pressure and an extra like kind of social expectations on that group to behave in a certain way. If we talk about Latinos, we're probably talking about variations on immigration law, along with simply the fact of being minorities and the structures of immigration and these structures that kind of keep non-English as like your first language speakers, keep them kind of out of certain opportunities. Like every group of demographic person has something that kind of holds them back, or at the very least some force that bears down on them. They're not all the same. Some of them are related, but they all in one form or fashion exist in our society. And wokeness, if we want to talk about the identification of those systems, of those hierarchies, wokeness does in fact identify those hierarchies. The only difference between what I think she's getting at, and this is if I'm being charitable, if I'm being charitable, what she is arguing is that through wokeness we will legitimize these hierarchies by the what's the word I'm looking for? By basically the acknowledgement of these systems. Which to me, I can't help but ask, like, how are we meant to solve any problem in our society on a systemic level if we are not capable or not we don't allow ourselves to recognize these problems and come up with solutions that are tailored to those problems? Sometimes there's broader problems. Sometimes the actual solution can reach across demographic issues. Like, you know, if you were to fix and kind of restructure our policing system, that absolutely would end up having a trickling effect going down the line to affect maybe in a positive way the amount of men who are treated poorly by the criminal justice system, by the by the custody, with the custody issue, we're talking about black men being overly policed, like all of these things can kind of be touched by one solution, and it's identify and like to be able to get to that solution, identify how broad that solution can reach, you would need to know these systems and the hierarchies that it's going to address. Like that's all wokeness. If again, I'm being charitable and what she means, if that's what we're talking about, if we're talking about hierarchies and everything else, it's not about establishing them. It's about acknowledging them and building our systems around those to basically cut those systems of oppression out for people. But anyway, continuing.
Sorry, it's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Now, I want to be really clear. I did not intend for this to be a gotcha moment. I asked her to define woke because I wanted to know in good faith. And that's because I know that many people take that word to mean many different things. And I wanted to figure out whether I might agree with her on certain points, as I had done earlier in the interview.
Which makes sense.
Alternatively, I wanted to be able to articulate why we differed on other aspects of her argument without devolving into the typical shouting matches that go, woke is bad, no, woke is good, oh no, you just don't know what woke really means. Say what you want about me, but I don't exactly have a reputation of being a woke scold. I spent a good part of my career as a leftist journalist critiquing what I believe to be certain overreaches of the left that, in my view, undermine important substantive
I don't know enough for history whether
racial,
I'd say
gender, and economic equality.
She is or isn't.
My very first 2 viral articles as a journalist were critiques of weaponized identity politics and of cultural appropriation discourse. In those articles, I questioned whether the gender and or race of politicians like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris were in fact being used to insulate them from legitimate concerns about their records on criminal justice issues, or in Clinton's case, her choice of an anti-choice VP.
Which they absolutely are.
I highlighted the perversity of Clinton using, dare I say, a kind of wokeness to excuse not regulating the banks more harshly in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. Well, breaking up the banks and racism was a line she used to push back against Bernie's call for greater punishment for the bankers that destroyed the economy. And it's perverse for obvious reasons.
Which have nothing to do with it. Like it's always it's so funny how people will bend themselves in to fucking mental pretzels to defend the fucking banks, who consistently, at the end of the day, they're banks, they're money-making operations. Their sole goal is to turn a profit and increase that profit as much as they possibly can. So naturally, if the Fed's giving out basically free money, they're gonna take it. They're gonna take it, they're gonna take that free money and fucking gamble with it.
People suffered disproportionately during the housing crisis, as more black wealth was rooted in real estate than was the case for other racial groups. Not only would breaking up the banks literally help black people, but nothing in Hillary's policy agenda was geared toward curing racism anyway. It was a rhetorical deflection that weaponized.
And keep in mind, there is no curing racism, I don't think. There's always going to be racism.
Equality to do the exact opposite, protect the banks at the expense of people of color and working class people more broadly. In the cultural appropriation article, I questioned whether we should really be mad at folks like Kim Kardashian for wearing black hairstyles like cornrows, when in my view, the more serious concern is long-standing economic.
Okay, so I've heard stuff like that. I really at the very least, on a conceptual level, I really don't see why people get in such a tizzy about stuff like that. It always feels like I feel like it comes from a place where, if you are if you're black in this country, there are a lot of systems that bear down on your experience as a citizen of the United States, right? There are a lot of systems that are out of your control, are much larger than you, and like the amount of like influence you have over the place in which you live is rather small. Like you know, how many like all of us, regardless of race, how many of us actually have like a firm grasp on what we control in the world, even in our like in our specific communities, specifically, like almost none, right? Like there's a pothole in your neighborhood, maybe it gets fixed, maybe it doesn't, but what do you end up doing every time you drive out to work? You just veer to the left a little bit to dodge that, because until the point in which it suddenly becomes fixed. But like at no point are you like, oh, there's like a pothole like that I always have to go past every single day in the week. I know exactly who to go to. I know exactly like I know the exact person to go to. I know exactly what they're gonna do, and I know the company that they're gonna use, or like, you know, whatever, to fill this pothole on my street. How many of us actually like know any of that? Almost none, because so much of our like community like leadership has been abstracted so much from you know, the way that like district lines are drawn, the way that the actual counties are gerrymandered in you know, in this or that political direction. We don't have a lot of control over a lot of things that impact our lives. So like I understand that like when people see like Kim Kardashian wearing cornrows, it's like the one thing that they can directly go to the person that they know who to take their like issue with, and immediately be able to get maybe not a response, but like you can immediately respond to Kim Kardashian. You can comment on her Instagram or whatever, the Twitter, whatever the fuck she uses. You can do that. You have a direct line to that person. Is it realistic that you're going to have any kind of actual interaction with them? Fuck no. But like, is it something? Is it like even like just a bit tangible? Yeah, I think so. And I understand that like, you know, like all of these factors every single day aren't in your control. But when somebody like Kim Kardashian appropriates your culture, you absolutely can get you and a couple other people to tweet at them, get a fucking hashtag going, and feel like you like fought back and won against something, you know? But like, if we're being honest, what is the material harm done by somebody getting this or that haircut? Honest to God, it's the case where like I understand and I sympathize with it, but I do wish people would focus less on that stuff, because it's really not like what we need to be worried about. Like, you know, when it's like Justin Trudeau doing like blackface, that's a different conversation. That guy has power. That might be a sign of, you know, specifically blackface has a history, you know, has a history in this country and in media in general. So that kind of says a lot about what he thinks of black people. But like getting your hairs braided is, I just think it's a jump, and it's just a bit like, I understand it, I sympathize, but like we need to focus on like the bigger stuff and not get bogged down with all the you know, what shirt are you wearing, are you, you know, is your hair the right color, you know, like stuff like that. Like I think it's that stuff like that, I think it's just distractions, that's all. But anyway, yeah.
Inequality that is racially distributed, and which punishes black women for wearing the same hairstyles for which white women are celebrated. In other words, is the problem really that a white person did something like open a taco shop or cook Asian food? Or is it that, say, Latinos have more difficulty securing loans to open restaurants than white people, and therefore aren't as able to profit from their own traditions as white people are?
Yeah, like the issue, if there's like a white person in your neighborhood that opens like a Chinese restaurant, right? Like the issue with that is not that they're like white and opened a Chinese restaurant. They have all the right in the world to open whatever restaurant and sell whatever fucking food they want. You know, if they just really like Chinese food, they like, let them do it. It's fine. The issue is the systemic preferences that we have. And by like, even then, when I say systemic preferences, it's not even that explicit. It's simply that like people who are born here, who have long lineages and can benefit from intergenerational wealth, which a lot of white families do get to do, have a higher basically chance to open the businesses that they want to open. And you know, this or that Chinese American family doesn't have that opportunity to open their kitchen, open their restaurant. That's the problem, is when like, you know, when the system you know, selects for generational wealth and kind of intergenerational wealth, but also like social status to a degree, you know, like, you know, if you are wealthy, you have like think about it. If you're like super wealthy, you get like there were stories in the Silicon Valley Bank story that if you kept your business's money in the bank, in Silicon Valley Bank, if you kept your business checking account or whatever with that bank, they would give you then kickbacks in your personal checking account that would allow you to get 0% mortgages, meaning you could get a house with no money owed as long as you paid off the principal. That's it. Which means any what's the word I'm looking for? Any equity built through that house immediately is profit for you. Immediately. You don't owe any money on it. So that immediately goes to profit. Which means like, you know, and they don't give that to normal people like you or I. I don't get a fucking 0% mortgage. They'll look at me, look at my like, you know, pretty normally, you know, normal wage job and say, no, you can get the standard 7 to 11 or whatever the fuck the percentage is for mortgages right now. But the rich person, they can have, we'll give them a smaller mortgage so that they buy more of our products. Like the system chooses for these people. It preferentiates. Or there's a preference. I don't know why I keep using the wrong words in verb tense or whatever. Or maybe in adjective tense. Point is, the system chooses for these people and actively, you know, rewards them for simply having money. You know, if you ever talked to anybody rich, you've ever heard them, you've probably heard the phrase where they're like, you know, when I was poor, you know, everyone always charged me for stuff. Everything always costs $1. But now that I'm rich, everyone wants to give me stuff for free. And like, that always comes from like, oh, you're rich. Like, you know, how many rich people have their Instagram accounts where they're given free clothes, free perfume, free this, free that. And the reason they're given that is because they're rich and they can flaunt it as a status item, therefore marketing it to poorer people or even to like upper to middle class people. Like it just, the system just preferences rich people and the wealthy. And a lot of that comes from, again, in the ability to build intergenerational wealth. If you only have 50 years to build wealth, you will be at a massive, you know, a disadvantage to somebody whose family has been building their wealth for, you know, 150 years, multiple generations. So, but yeah.
At any rate, I never described these leftover reaches as woke because I grew up with the traditional meaning of the word, which was positive. Wokeness was defined as an awareness of historical and ongoing prejudices, mostly racial prejudices.
That is a definition.
But that
that's also the thing, is like, it's not even
moments where left social ideology,
strong
which at that
definition.
point during the Obama years was ascendant, didn't seem to sometimes jump the shark in a way I worried would ultimately harm the interests of the left. So I came up with new terms like weaponized identity politics, instead of just complaining about identity, which of course we all have and appreciate to certain degrees. And maybe I should have come up with something like weaponized wokeness, a toxic strategy liberals have been deploying for years, per the Hillary Clinton example. When conservatives complain about woke banks like SVB, they're half right. It's not that the bank failed because Black people worked there. The bank failed because of deregulation, and I go into more depth.
Wait, no, Brianna, whoa. This is a massive fucking smokescreen. Yeah, this is, first of all, this is in an op-ed of Daily Mail. Second of all, a board, first of all, just breaking down this headline, SVB hired board obsessed. So first you would have to actually substantiate what you mean by obsessed. Do you mean like that's the only thing they invested in? And also you would need to ask, were any of those investments the reason why the bank went under? Because this is the key part. The actual individual investments were not the problem with Silicon Valley Bank. I have synthesized a lot of fucking information over the last like 2 days, I guess day and a half, like yesterday when I didn't stream. Point is, like, when we talk about Silicon Valley Bank and their investment strategy, it was not centered, regardless of what it was centered around, even if it was centered around the healthier planet stuff, right? That's not why it went under. It went under because of the bonds that they bought at a certain what's the word I'm looking for? Interest rate that then basically turned over. Once the Fed increased their interest rates, the Silicon Valley Bank essentially was holding on to bonds that were costing them money, that they were going to then lose money when they went to sell those, right? They bought it at, they bought these bonds at $1, right? They bought them at $1, but now the bonds are going to cost to sell $1.80, we'll say. I'm just using I'm just using fake numbers, or I guess it would be the opposite, that they're a little bit less. Fucking economics is hard, okay? And I'm not a math person. But the point is, the reason why Silicon Valley Bank fell into the problem that they did was because of once the inflationary, with inflation being as high as it was, and with the Fed raising the interest rates, it then basically venture capitalists pulled a lot of their money out of the bank, right? Now, if you're like Silicon Valley Bank, you're like, okay, well, we don't have like all of that money on hand. You don't sit on all of that money. When you deposit your money in the bank, they then reinvest that into, this or that thing, right? But the problem was, since a bunch of these venture capitalists ended up pulling their money out of the bank because they pretty much were told, pretty much we're all like kind of in the same, I think it was described as like kind of the same group chat, and they all came to the determination that like, hey, this bank, based on the numbers that we have, based on like their, all of their leveraged assets and everything else, it would be wise for everybody to get the fuck out before the bottom falls out from under it. Not realizing that basically they were avoiding the thing that they were going to cause. So venture capitalists pull their money out, and mind you, again, the SVB did not have the money on hand at that moment to pay everybody. So what they ended up having to do was sell all of their bonds, which again they were going to lose money on, meaning that they lost, I believe the number was $1.8 billion in the sale of the bonds that they bought previously. Meaning that the bank lost $1.8 billion on those bonds, and when other people wanted to take their money out, they didn't have the money to actually like give back the money to their depositors. And it's why the FDIC stepped in, shut them down, because they found out once all of this money had gotten moved out of the bank, they pretty much found out that there's no floor to this bank. It's just hovering there. There's nothing there. There's no actual money that they can hand out to their customers, to their depositors. That's why the individual actual investments had no part to play in this. Absolutely, there's no evidence to that. You can say like, oh, well, they did care about doing green initiatives. Cool. That's really nice. That still has nothing to fucking do with the actual like reason why the bottom fell out of this bank. The bottom fell out because venture capitalism got out, and the cheap bonds that the government has been selling over the last we're talking about regulations back in like they haven't increased the interest rate as much as they have for over like 10 years, I think. So like naturally, these banks ended up buying up all these bonds that they were like, fuck it, this is like free money. We just take it, we immediately reinvest them. And what they should have been doing, or at the very least, they should have been investing up to a certain amount. Another problem was that they were over leveraged. They were only supposed to have about, I think it was $250 billion it was, until they would get basically audited, or until the regulations would essentially kick in. But it was raised to 250. It used to be 50 billion. So like this small bank was like, originally was sitting on a much lower regulatory line, basically, where they'd get audited, or they wouldn't be allowed to even hold that many assets and stuff, or be leveraged by that many assets. Again, all of this, I want to reiterate, I hate the terminology when it comes to economics, but keep in mind, none of this, not a single person in my fucking comment section on YouTube, by the way, none of them can point me to the reason that any of these ESG investments had anything to do with this bank's closure, because it doesn't. Their investments weren't the problem. The fact that they overinvested and overreached with their investments is the problem, which comes down to government regulation.
About this in yesterday's radar. But it is true that corporations have been using diversity initiatives to insulate themselves from legitimate criticisms about their business practices. Like, for example, not having a risk officer for most of last year. Of course, it's possible to have boards that aren't all white or all straight.
Right. And having a risk officer has nothing to do with if you hire black people. It just doesn't. Those two things aren't related. Like people would look at it and be like, oh, they had a month-long pride event, or pride celebration, to which I would have to ask, how long do you think pride lasts? It's in the next word. It's called Pride Month, first of all. Second of all, do you think they were going to parades for 30 days straight? Like, what do you think happened at a normal office building for a pride celebration? They most likely put up a fucking cork board and put up some fucking pride flags, and maybe gave out a gift bag or something. But like, when we're talking about like the fundamental functions of banking, these two things aren't related. Like they just aren't. There is no direct connection. You're just naming two things that happened in this building and connecting them. This is the problem with this is a misunderstanding of correlation and causation. Absolutely, there is a correlation that they had a month-long pride event and the company went under, but in no way are those two things causative. Not one did not lead to the other. Or at the very least, I would be really interested if somebody could point me in the direction to prove that that was the case, which nobody has to this day.
And be attendant to financial risks. But companies are playing a game of three-card Monte, hoping you look over there at the Pride Parade sponsorship so you don't notice their other more unsavory behaviors. Think Israel pinkwashing fighter planes that drop bombs on Arabs of all sexual preferences, or McDonald's introducing paper straws that turn out to be non-recyclable. Being woke, the good kind of woke, is sometimes profitable, at least in the current moment. So companies do want to appear woke, but no, they don't actually want to spend money on creating real
companies have the
economic
same
equality
shallow understanding of
would need at the
wokeness
bottom line.
that the people who hate it have.
So they co-opted wokeness, equality and justice movements to claim unearned public goodwill. And this is
which,
something
keep in mind,
I
they did
criticize
it
regularly.
They're not
along
rebuilding
with a
their
certain kind
systems at the end of the day.
Sensitivity around speech and language as violence rhetoric that can too often shut down meaningful conversations that help each other understand each other as a community and form bonds that could help us go after the real enemy, the elites who hope to keep us in line by performing wokeness or anti-wokeness instead of paying fair wages, cleaning up the pollution that leaks into our communities, like what's happening in East Palestine, and sending our kids to war. So when Bethany said she was worried about wokeness affecting young children, I genuinely wanted to know what she meant. Now, it's become clear as she answered my question that she might not have been used to answering that kind of question. And I understand why.
How do you write a book and
Most of us are
you don't expect to get the question of like, can you define wokeness for me since you wrote a book? Or at least, as she said, a whole chapter about it? Like, come on now.
Ideological silos. And when we speak predominantly to people within our own bubbles, we can get away with being kind of imprecise. Everyone in our own audience knows what we mean and can project their own frustrations and their own definitions on these kinds of words. Woke is perfect for exactly that reason. It gives a lot of cultural cachet to a lot of fragmented different ideas about what's wrong in the world. I mean, we all have something that we're mad at in these modern times, and I have even found myself reaching for the word woke as an easy catch-all to describe behavior
headphones.
by liberals
That's the thing
that
I'm
I
mad
disagree
at.
with.
We need less cords in the
Liberals
world.
who dismissed Matt Taibbi's reporting on the Twitter files on the basis that he's a, quote, white man, instead of engaging
What is this? Matt Taibbi and Elon Musk rummaged through millions of emails and Slack messages from pre-Musk Twitter, and all they found was employees deliberately consulting with each other about how to fairly apply and enforce rules. But I get it. To a rich white man, that seems very oppressive. I mean, absolutely. But also, again, like, I've said it a million times. The Twitter files would not hold up to any journalistic standard. At the end of the day, it's like they were an investigation, but an investigation through only one lens and only to find evidence of one very specific narrative. And any information to the contrary was either not given, was hidden, or obfuscated.
Substantively with what they do or do not appreciate about his work. But when pressed for specifics, it became clear, at least from my subjective
Taibbi is a
view,
disappointment.
that
I'm sure he'll do good work in the future, but this will always kind of be just a black mark on his career, in my opinion.
On children. The example that she offered when pressed was of a friend's 5-year-old child who came home from a birthday party saying she liked girls, and that her teacher responded, "That's okay." You can read the tweet.
I was recently at my friend's son's 8th birthday party, God forbid. I was chatting with one of the moms, and she said that her 5-year-old daughter came home from the school and said she likes girls, and that her teacher said that's okay. Cool.
For yourself here on the screen.
Imagine, keep in mind, this is the thing that like that Republican politicians have been arguing is an epidemic in schools, that we cannot allow teachers to indoctrinate our children by saying that's okay. Like, that's it. This is the fundamental thing that Republicans have a problem with in Florida, Tennessee, and all these other states that are passing anti-LGBT laws.
And there's nothing in that tweet or in the rest of the thread that indicates that the child meant that she liked girls romantically. Kids, of course, often find members of the opposite sex distasteful at that age, saying they have cooties and are gross. And as I said to Bethany on the show, it seems to me that if anyone's sexualizing children, it was her friend who presumed the girl meant that she wanted to have a romantic relationship with other girls. Moreover, that's okay is probably the most neutral way a person can respond to a child in that situation.
Most of the times when kids say stuff, you just say, okay,
wrong to like girls?
Sounds good.
Is telling a kid it's wrong to like girls not a kind of indoctrination that cuts in the opposite direction? See, so much of this discourse ignores that teachers and parents are dealing with really tough choices. Child rearing is deeply personal, but much of a child's life is spent away from parents at school. There are bound to be values gaps between parents and teachers, cutting in both directions. My grandfather didn't love the indoctrination of my mom being forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance in the years after the McCarthy era and the intelligence agencies' attacks on Black equality movements at the time.
I can respect it.
Maybe someone else would prefer to pass on some.
Personally, I think the Pledge of Allegiance is cringe, and it, like, if you want to hold the Pledge of Allegiance, I got no problem with that. But like, I remember a time where, like, if you could not deign to even think about like sitting out of the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, I was in like, what was I in? Maybe 4th grade? I think I was in 3rd grade, actually. No, I was in 4th grade. I was in like 4th grade, I'm pretty sure. And like when 9/11 happened, and like after that point, for at least like a good like year or two, it was like, oh dude, the like forced patriotism was unbearable. It was absolutely unbearable.
Religious teaching that condemns homosexuality, for instance. But I'd argue it's not the school's role to parrot my grandfather's militancy any more than it is for a teacher to project homophobia on a 5-year-old who probably just thinks that boys are gross because she's 5. Instead of engaging in our communities, trying to find neutral
I also
ground,
don't know where this has come
celebrating
up with
teachers
kids.
like the one in
Raising
the
kids has always been
example who
hard.
managed to
And
give
like parents have always been dealing with this, but
non-criminal,
suddenly like
non-judgmental
in
affirmation to
2023
a
it's become
child.
like such an
Some of
issue.
us are
Like
holding
what
folks
if my
like that
kid's like
up as
gay?
literal
What if they're like
rumors.
all right? Like
Now, I might agree with
kind of
Mandel
always
that
been
some
hard to
people
be a
engage
parent.
in hierarchies of
like
oppression.
sounds like a skill
or
issue.
use their historically discriminated against status to bully others, say in classroom contexts, into submitting to their worldview. Of course that happens sometimes. I've seen it. I might agree that it's wrong to lash out at people who make good faith mistakes as they try to wrestle with new social norms like pronouns and dead names, but who are genuinely trying to do the right thing and be polite and courteous to others. Left-leaning author Sam Adler-Bell, in fact, wrote a really compelling piece in New York Magazine last
How
year.
do you all read this much?
Which I covered on my
God damn, I can't
podcast,
read.
Bad Faith.
I cannot
In it,
read
he
like.
defined the new wokeness,
Let me just say.
not the
To any like to any lefty watching who's like, let me give you a warning right now. I am not the most read person. I just don't like reading that much. I like listening to shit all the time, but goddamn, dude, the amount of like reading I feel like one has to do to be part of the left sometimes is like is a bit much. Like it's just like, dude, I don't got all this time to fucking read all this goddamn literature. Like, good God.
old
Or
version
read
with
like
this
every
kind of
other
new
article.
sensibility of something
Also,
going
my
off the rails
reading isn't
as,
great,
quote,
so
the
it's kind of a bitch to read for me
invocation
sometimes.
of
So
unintuitive and morally
It also might be that
burdensome
bias a
political
bit.
norms and ideas in a manner which suggests they are self-evident. And I think that that definition is important. I agree with that framing in particular so far as it criticizes not traditional wokeness, but the idea that these new norms are supposed to be self-evident when they're not. They're new. And that those of us who stumble to adapt to them should be subject to ridicule or, dare I say, cancellation when you err in good faith. Think, for example, the Stanford banned words list that condemned the use of the term grandfathered in. Is that something that most people are aware of and that they should get a tongue lashing for continuing to use in conversation? I think most of us agree no. So the reason
that
why
like
it
a
was
thing you're not
important
allowed
for
to
Sam
say?
to define a version of wokeness before he critiqued it is the same reason I urged Bethany to define it. Because it can mean so many things to so many people, a failure to define the word woke serves to divide us and obscure the extent to which most of us agree about some basic things. One, it's good to live in a pluralistic society, but it can be challenging. We want to protect our freedoms without infringing on others. And when we butt heads, when we do infringe, we want to treat each other with compassion and understanding. That means Bethany homeschooling her children and having the right to do so. It also means opposing state efforts to ban the rights of other parents to allow their children to access gender-affirming care if they, in consultation with their doctors, believe that's the right course of action. It means trying to respect people when they tell you how they identify, or alternatively, accepting that a decision not to respect other people's identity means you might not be liked very much, and that's okay. You know, if your name is Bob and I insist on calling you Cheryl, I don't get to claim to be canceled when you don't want to be around me or work with me. That's just common decency.
Yeah, that's also, I remember like hearing about that one like that one person that J.K. Rowling was sticking up for. I don't remember their name, but I remember it's like, yeah, they didn't get their contract renewed because they were being like, they were actively being assholes to people in the office. And it's like, yeah, if you create a hostile environment, then like, regardless of whether you have freedom of speech, like, sorry, you can go work with people you're not going to be hostile towards. You don't have like you have no right to like work somewhere and like be mean to people and like keep your job. Like, no, like it's certainly no business owner should like, you know, no business owner should be like, well, you know, they just do too good of a job, even though like they've become a liability and people end up leaving because of their activity. I have to keep them because I'm not allowed to fire them for being an asshole. Like that'd be an insane
Discourse,
world.
and this was also true of cancel culture discourse and CRT discourse, by the way, is that when we get to specific cases, most of us agree on a lot. Mendel cited a statistic that only 7% of people identify as woke, but in fact, a recent study in The Hill showed that most people view it as a positive term. Most Americans oppose things like book banning, even if you put the word woke in front of books, and that includes books that are banned in the interest of wokeness, like the Roald Dahl stories that are being edited to exclude words like fat or ugly. Liberals agree that that was an overreach. Whoopi Goldberg agreed.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
So what
These are
we
adjectives at the end of the
actually
day.
arguing about exactly?
Like,
I don't want to play.
like at the end of the day, what do you think you're going to do? Like, you're going to take like fat or ugly out of the lexicon? Like it's just not going to happen. And either way, people will just people will just use other terms to describe those things. Like that stuff like that's kind of, I find to be kind of just useless. You're swinging at the wind at that point.
Dumb here. I'm sure there is a sincere disagreement about whether, say, a book affirming the validity of parents who are exotic dancers is appropriate for school-age children. That was another example that Bethany brought up in our interview. And school boards can decide whether or not they want to keep a book like that in a school library. But advocates like Bethany seem to sometimes be arguing that those books shouldn't exist at all, that they should be censored altogether, not even published. But the reality of life is that some exotic dancers have children, some sex workers have children, and those jobs are real jobs that put food on their family's table. And those parents have every right to seek out or even write literature that helps them explain their reality to their children. Look, some parents are obese, some parents smoke, some parents only see their kids once a month, some parents engage in all kinds of behaviors that I might not choose for my hypothetical children. But I think it would be deeply authoritarian and presumptuous of me to tell other parents that they can't access books that help them explain their life and their reality to their children. Wokeness is hard to define for the same reason that what is a woman is a hard question to answer pithily. It's because different people have different definitions of the word. It's that simple. It isn't a gotcha, and it shouldn't be treated as such. But we also should.
I mean, when it comes to the woman thing, so the thing around the like woman discourse also comes down to a like, it always comes down to like what you're trying to define, because like there's a lot of people on the right who I think want to define woman by like these biological like traits, basically, i.e. like chromosomes, or like, you know, your or, you know, the you know, your genitalia or whatever, right? Like, and but when it comes down to it, like, we already have a word for that. It's called females. So when we talk about women, what we're asking is, what are the people who like, you know, have these traits, right? They fit into which social role? To which most people be like, all right, women. Like, yeah, like females fit into the women category in terms of like our social organization. To which I'd be like, I agree. But we have to understand, we have to come to the very like the first step understanding that women, we're not talking about anybody's chromosomes or genitalia. It's just not what we're describing, because woman does not capture all aspects of like you know, or at the very least like female, I should say. Female does not capture all aspects of being a woman. Being a woman is about your secondary sex characteristics. It's about the role you're playing in society. It's about a lot of different things. Again, I don't know if I said, I don't know if I said this to if I said this on stream, but like, go up to like, talk to any woman, talk to your mom, ask her what her like favorite aspects of being a woman are. None of them are going to be biology. Biology is for other things. We have biological like explanations, definitions, all of that stuff for a specific use. But when we talk about woman, we are talking about society and the role you play, along with like probably a few other things. But like, woman isn't just biology. We have a term for that. It's female.
I'll be able to identify specifically
and
what
like,
we're really
I know. I just started and stopped again. And again, like female means something concrete. Woman means different things to different people, the same way woke does. So that's what I like. Woman is fluid. There's a lot of things that can and can't be in there. Women have big titties. Women have small titties. Women are tall. Women are short. Women are black. Women are white. Women are able to have kids. Some women are unable to have kids. There's all these variations of what a woman is. There isn't like a set. There isn't like this like set that gets you into it. It's usually just a combination of whichever ones that it's like women, not all women have long hair. Some women have short hair. Some women have really short hair. I mean, really long hair. Like all variations. There's so much more variance that we can describe with women that we can't with female. Females rather static, not completely, but more static than woman is.
Mad at. So our society doesn't evolve into all of us being mad at each other while the world burns. So,
Wow.
Batia, I felt, some kind
Okay. We're not gonna. Well, it's only 5 minutes. We'll listen to the
way
back and
about the
forth.
pylon. I think that some people really missed the point of an exchange like that. But it's just to say it's actually difficult to define these words because we all have different things in mind. And I would love us just to be more specific about what we talk about so we don't end up in these interminable debates about what people really mean when they say something.
Right. So I should start by saying
big
Bethany
fucking
is
table.
a dear friend of mine. She obviously knows what the word woke means. She tweeted her definition later in the day, and she was angry about a lot of the most important things, I think.
I'm gonna say it. She didn't tweet it immediately. Took some time and was like, okay, let me think how to define this.
In terms
Like,
of
yeah, if you're asked to give a definition, you have like, oh, take your time. You'll come up with something eventually. But the fact that it's not like right there, the same way you can define a lot of things, should kind of tell you something about
children,
that.
at least throughout the COVID period, one of the few early voices who understood how difficult that was going to be for kids. And anybody laughing at her having that brain freeze obviously does not spend a lot of time going on TV and has not written a book because honestly, Brianna, like there, but for the grace of God go I, right? All of us kind of,
I
Oh,
have
yeah,
been
yeah.
there.
do that a lot.
As
I've
a-
had my
I-
day
I-
on the
I
internet
can,
for sure.
Exactly. So
I can certainly,
what I want to do is sort
relate.
of make the case for why,
There's that
very
aspect.
briefly, why
Be nice to people.
I think that using the word woke actually might have a benefit that I think you might actually even agree with. First of all, the wokes are obviously the people who, from the left, who hate you a hard time for
The
being
wokes.
so
Oh, woke
eloquent about the
skulls, okay.
dangers of, so my definition of wokeness, right, superimposing a racial binary onto a power binary in a way that suggests that, Don Lemon is a victim.
Wait, there is no racial binary. How could there possibly be a racial binary? We have how many different races? Okay.
And the residents of East Palestine are oppressors, right? You are very eloquent in calling that out. And the people who hate you for doing it, that is the people that, I think it's important to have.
I don't know where this comes from. Okay. Let me talk this real quick. I don't know where this comes from. I'm not sure like what group of people would say that the people in East Palestine are oppressors. I remember somebody bringing up like CRT, but all CRT is trying to do is identify the relationship of people in groups to other people in groups in terms of like the hierarchy, but that doesn't really like being white doesn't make you an oppressor. Like that's not a thing. Owning other people makes you an oppressor. Like that's what that is. But like I don't know where this like whole nonsense about like white people in East Palestine are no, they're just people. They're just people. If they own people, they're oppressors, absolutely. But like, are they oppressors? No, they haven't. They just live their lives. Like you could argue that like the racial identity that they share is one of higher hierarchical status. Sure, you could argue that they have some mild advantages in terms of the way that our society has been structured. That's fine. But like oppressor, I don't know anybody who's using it in that form or fashion.
Terminology that allows us to critique that, but a terminology crucially that is available to people who don't have the luxury that we do of sitting around and talking about what
Bree
to
looks
call
like
things
kind
all
of
day.
annoyed.
You know, I'm working on a book about the working class, which means I talk to a lot of
Ugh.
working class Americans every week. A lot of
I
people
really
of
need to
color
know when people talk
who
about the
use
working class. I need to know what they like. I'm starting. Sometimes I get this feeling that like when people say the working class, they really just like and like I just feel like they're just talking about like former like fucking like white steel workers in Ohio. Like I feel like that's the group that they're gonna talk to like almost exclusively. I'm nervous about the racial diversity whenever people talk about at least from a conservative standpoint being interested in the working class, because it seems like the Republican Party is rather self-interested in that manner, in grifting in favor or grifting for the favor of the white working class, not the working class, but white working class. So when she says I'm writing a book for, about the working class, I kind of worry that she's being a bit dishonest and that she's going to end up writing a book about the white working class. But the book's not out. She could prove me wrong.
the word woke because it came to
My head,
represent
it
something
itches.
that bothers them about what their children are being taught in school. Excuse me. And so I think a little bit that there is a class component to saying, look, we need to not use this word that has come to stand in for something that we can all agree is happening in a useful way.
But we can't all agree what it is. How can we agree
because,
it's happening if we don't know what it is?
We need a word that is accessible.
If it's like it's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, if the definition of wokeism or being woke is everything, then yeah, it's always happening then, because everything's always happening. There's no way to not identify something as woke. You could identify anything as woke.
It doesn't have to be woke. But to me, giving people who don't have the luxury of sitting around all day and thinking about what to call things a vocabulary to describe something that they are seeing and noticing and is bothering them and upsetting them, and as you point out,
maybe they should just educate themselves on what the issue they're having,
right?
instead of trying to come up with a term to encompass like multiple different things.
Ideas. I think if that would be my case for the word. So what do you make?
Like my issue is she's arguing for like, what if we just came up with a new word, or we just accepted woke as a term for X number of things that people are like upset about, to which it's like, we're still not identifying anything though. We're still not identifying what the problem is. And those people can't identify what the problem is. Or at the very least, it's going to take forever for them to explain what they're actually concerned about. If you're actually concerned about the indoctrination of our children, right? The question needs to be asked, okay, what do you mean by that? And then they go, and like saying, oh, I don't like my kid being taught woke stuff. And then you go, what does that mean? And then they say, well, the indoctrination of our kids in schools. And you go, okay, what do you mean by that? And like, it's just we wouldn't be getting anywhere. What she's arguing is like keeping things the exact same way it is now. Like, let's not have a definition. Let's like either come up with a new term that, will mean the same thing, will mean thing I'm upset with, but can't identify. Maybe, crazy thought, us as Americans need to be better at identifying the issues that we're having with our society. Like this is probably the bigger thing, is like, that should tell you a lot that Americans are incapable of identifying vocally, like, and accurately what they have an issue with. You're advocating for the problem to continue.
Think of that, Brianna.
My concern is that, one, woke has not organically had this shift in meaning. It is people like Christopher Rufo who very purposefully changed the meaning of that word and used words like CRT, introduced new words and concepts like CRT that weren't really commonly known, because they understand that they can capitalize on sincerely held, often economically driven concerns, and take it from the realm of do something about my economic status to this is actually a cultural problem, and then have people in power, have elites that have control, status, and money not have to be responsible to the underlying economic concern, because they can superficially appear to be going after it by going after something as
super
abstract
correct
as wokeism. So I would argue that leaning into those kind of words help people who are elites and powerful avoid their fundamental responsibilities. It's Hillary Clinton saying, it's,
You know what really bugs me about this? I don't know if you guys might not be able to see it, but like the boxes they're in are like the same shape. Like the actual box that they're in is like the same size, but then the outer box is like this weird, like there's weird divots in it, and it's all like not the same size. It's really throwing me off. It's bothering me.
you know, I'm going to do wokeness. We're going to do racial identity politics. We're breaking up the banks, cure racism instead of breaking up the banks. And on the other side, it's Ron DeSantis saying it's a woke company, it's woke Disney. There are woke issues going on here. Instead of breaking it down the issues, are there labor issues going on at Disney? Do the workers there get enough money?
Yeah, and like Ron DeSantis doesn't give a shit about any of these things that she's listing. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't care about their labor practices. He doesn't care about their wage disparities. He doesn't care about their environmental effects. He doesn't care about any of this. It is simply a political opposition that he has. An empty political opposition.
Are you erasing the reality of low-income workers in Disney World by calling them woke? Does the fact that they might have political beliefs, cultural beliefs that are different from yours, make them fundamentally not your ally in a struggle for good pay and labor protections? And so, I mean, I got to just push back against that. The problem in East Palestine isn't wokeness.
So why would you even say woke then?
Lobbyists who spend millions of dollars rolling back safety regulations or preventing safety regulations from being
like, I feel like this is the let's see, basically just an obsession over identity politics, but that's already identity politics. Also, isn't wokeism also what's it called, the indoctrination of our children through gender and sexual ideologies
to put in place, which might have prevented a crisis like this happening in the first place? And it's very difficult for me to understand how words like woke and some of these other cultural terms do anything other than get people farther away from having an acknowledgement that they have a class identity and class solidarity to each other, that if they're able to access, can help them actually change the economic reality in this country.
I'm not playing. Oh, the video's basically done. Okay.
Well, I'm sure we could talk about this for the rest of the day, but we certainly have more rising to get to.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably could talk about the rest of the day, because there's unfortunately just not really an end to that rabbit hole. I find that it's just like you just keep running back to like different definitions and stuff. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.